Woman, wala. Welcome everybody to the Safina Society Nothing But Facts live stream on a rainy Tuesday, which is in the last Tuesday before the month of Ramadan, which is coming in upon us on Sunday evening. We'll be checking, and most of the Eastern world apparently will not be seeing any hilals, any new moons on Sunday evening, as estimated. All right, why don't you, one of you, pull up the halal, the Crescent Moon Watch websites. Okay, most likely, and then we will end up waiting for San Diego to do us a favor. We'll end up be waiting for Hawaii or one of these other deep, Western cities to find us, to find us that hilal, so that we can be aligned with our local masajid, because all the local masajid, like I would say 90% of the country, they operate by the Mecca calendar. The Mecca calendar is when the moon would be visible, right? And it's always an issue and always a problem, when your community's on one wavelength and you're on another wavelength. You don't want that. Eid is the worst. First day of Ramadan, no, not an issue. Because you could show up to Taraweeh and pray Taraweeh, but you can't show up to Eid and just say, let me just do what everyone's doing. It's a problem. So, alhamdulillah, we won't have much of an issue for Eid, but we probably will have an issue for the first day of Ramadan. And that calendar is mostly correct. It's once every 7 years you have an issue, right? And we're lucky because we're all the way on the Western Hemisphere. So we get to wait for all those countries to have a moon sighting. Right? And if just one of them has a moon sighting, khalas, we're off the hook, right? Then our ibadah is in accord to the mashhur of all the madhabs, which is, now why is it moon sighting over this calculations? The reason is that the moon sighting is something that everyone has access to. And the Sharia requires acts of worship to be done in such a manner that it's definitive. So a calculation is not something that a single Muslim in New Jersey knows how it's done. Right? You have no clue how it's done. You're just trusting somebody. And major matters of religion like this cannot be based upon trusting somebody. Expertise, anything that's limited to expertise, right? It's not accepted for our ibadah, for ibadat. You can accept it for other things, but not ibadat. So even the calculations of the prayer times, right? Just merely the number on a calendar is not sufficient. But there's no harm in that, because I could just wait 5 minutes and then pretty much sure it'll be in. So Allah Ta'ala gave us the sun. Everyone has access to the sun. And He gave us the moon. Everyone has access to the moon. Ash-shamsu wal-qamaru bi-husban, Surah Ar-Rahman. Right? The sun and the moon are meant for us to know how we're operating in the day and how we're operating regarding the month. Okay? All right, so that's bi'idhnillah ta'ala coming up. We are streaming today. We're streaming tomorrow. We're off Thursday, though. Thursday we are off. Okay. And Thursday we're off. We're not streaming Thursday. I'm off Thursday. But then we are streaming in Ramadan up to the last 10 days. So we are streaming Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. But Ramadan hours are 2 o'clock. So it's 2 o'clock to, let's say, 4 o'clock in Ramadan, and then last 10 days it's lights out. All right, we're lights out on the last 10 days. I want to read a little bit an ayah of tafsir here from Surah Al-Baqarah on Imam al-Baghawi. Imam al-Baghawi on his Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. تلك الرسل فضلنا بعضهم على بعض. These messengers we preferred some over the others. Some over others. What is the meaning of that? That means each prophet was given a different virtue that no other prophet was given. Okay? Each prophet was given a different gift. So each prophet is unique, right, from every other prophet. And it is said that we could find a qiyas for the miracle of every prophet, or the gift of every prophet given to our messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or something superior. And it's not true that the prophet was given every miracle that every other prophet was given. That's not true. But you can argue that he was given something superior to that. Now, why would we say that? We'd say that because what is the purpose of a prophetic miracle? It's to point people to him, right? It is a statement from Allah Ta'ala that this is a truthful abd. This is a truthful messenger. He's telling the truth. The sign of his truthfulness is a couple things. Number one, he confirms the messages before him. Number two, he behaves righteously. We see righteous teachings from him. Number three, he has miracles. So miracles is not the only sign that he's speaking the truth. Why do we have to say that? Because Dajjal also has khawariq al-adat. Dajjal does things that normal everyday people never do. So what is the difference between that and a miracle? Dajjal, at some point in time, he tells you he's a king. Then he says, I'm a prophet, I'm a messenger. Then he says, I'm God himself. Okay. So the assessment is not just the miracle. The assessment is it in line, is his teaching aligned with the previous prophets? And that's where we can say his khawariq al-adat is kufr, or it's rejected. It's from shaitan. Its source is darkness. There's a world of darkness and there's a world of light. All the Hindu gurus and all the Hindu Shivas and all these people, they do khawariq al-adat, but their source is darkness. It's a world of darkness, and it's the world of the dark jinn and black magic and all that stuff. So it's important to know this, because essentially khawariq al-adat is not limited to prophets. We have to understand that. A lot of people can do things that you've never seen before. All right? So if you notice, the ayat about prophets is, and I confirm what came before us. So Sayyidina Isa comes doing miracles and confirming the teaching of Moses, the position of prophethood in the Torah. It's not the law that he's confirming, it's the aqidah that's confirming, because clearly a new messenger comes in, he brings a new law. So how is his confirmation of the past law relevant? No, it's a confirmation of the aqidah, not the new law. Okay, it's a confirmation of those past prophets. So I had this debate with somebody one time. He says, because you all actually don't believe that miracles are intrinsically different, right? Khawariq al-adat are intrinsically different from what like the Dajjal does. And the answer is no, they're not different. In a miracle, Allah says kun fayakun, live, and he lives. The Dajjal is not doing these miracles by himself. Allah himself, everything is by his power, the good and the evil. All right? Good and evil are by his power. Dajjal does not do any of these. They're not miracles, they're khawariq adat, changes of the norm. He only does them because Allah permits them. That's the simple answer to that, right? Because Allah does it through him to test us. We don't even say Allah permits it, as if there's another power and Allah is allowing that power to do its thing. No, Allah does it, everything. He does those things and he has the right to test us. So the difference being, this Dajjal is going to speak words of kufr when compared to the aqidah of the previous prophet, which is Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and all the NBF. Sayyidina Isa will come, he will do khawariq adat, and he will affirm the aqidah of previous prophets, okay, and the law of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So as a result, we can follow that. Let's say a blind person comes upon, or a person who's never seen the image of Sayyidina Isa, does not know what he looks like. He's never seen another Muslim. And now Prophet Isa comes to him and he does these khawariq adat. He raises the dead and he does whatever the miracles that he's going to do in the end of time. Just a hypothetical. This is not going to happen because all Muslims are in touch with other Muslims. But let's hypothetically say he's in a position where he can't ask a scholar. He has to make a judgment for himself. So someone does a miracle right in front of him. The question is, and we're not going to follow you just because of a miracle, right? Give me some other evidence that I should obey you. And in what am I obeying you? And the point is, and really, this is almost irrelevant because Prophet Isa never commands anybody to anything contrary to the Sharia. Sheikh al-Maghidi, in a video series that we're going to release on questions and answers, one of the questions I asked him was, when someone claims to be al-Imam al-Mahdi, how do we confirm him and what do we do about it? And he actually paused a while for this, and he said all of us should try to be a Mahdi. And what he meant by that is that, what is the Mahdi? other than a Muslim who acts upon the Sharia. And the Mahdi acts upon it at the biggest level, the level of nations, right? He unifies nations come under him. But he is literally doing nothing other than acting upon the Sharia that's between our two hands right now. So he says, as long as you know the Sharia, and in terms of your judgment of him, if you feel like I'm not strong enough to judge what he's doing, we'll ask other scholars. And they affirm that this is the correct action according to the Sharia, then we support him. There is no Aqidah point that says, I have to believe you are the Mahdi. We support him, that's it. If he's the Mahdi that the Prophet intended or not is irrelevant, because there's no act in Sharia called affirming the Mahdi. There is affirming the truth. Whether that truth comes from you, whether that truth comes from Imam Mahdi, whether Muhammad bin Salman, Allah guides him and he now starts acting upon the truth, it's irrelevant, right? Whether the label of Al-Mahdi, it is a true label, but there's no shari'i or legal action regarding that. There is no shahada for him. I don't have to testify that you are Al-Mahdi. I just have to support you. Like, he will be such a clear proof of religion and such a clear what he's doing is sound, that what I'll be rejecting is the truth. That's the rejection, and that's the sinfulness of the rejection. Right? The sinfulness of the rejection of Al-Mahdi is the sinfulness of rejecting the truth. Okay? And that's why it becomes, that person is in the ulama say he will be not in a good state. Some even said no one will reject him except a munafiq, because of how clear the Sharia that he's acting upon is. Like, he doesn't act upon debatable matters. He's not making judgment calls. It's crystal clear law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's it. So for that reason, that's the basis of our actions. So when we say prophets, some preferred some over others, and we say no, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is going to have the greatest of all miracles. So if a miracle is meant as a signpost, follow this person, he's a true messenger. Well, then we have to ask the question, who has the most people looking at his signpost? In other words, which prophet is doing da'wah to the most people? It's the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? Sayyidina Musa, he did da'wah to people, and his message was for people for a certain number of years until Prophet Isa came. Prophet Isa after a certain number of years. Both of them limited to Bani Israel. The Prophet Musa was not sent to the people of China. The Prophet Musa was not sent to the people of India. Okay? The Prophet Prophet Isa himself was not sent to the people of Scandinavia. Right? Although they've made Jesus Scandinavian. Right? He's not even sent to you. He was not a messenger sent to you. He was not a messenger sent to South America or to Africa. Okay? The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was sent to all these places. Sayyidina Isa was sent to his people. He was a local prophet. Right? Or for that ummah. Local doesn't mean a small neighborhood. It means for that ummah, which was a big ummah, but that ummah only. So being that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam was sent to more people for more time, it makes sense that his signpost, his sign, has to be bigger than everyone else's. It has to be bigger. It has to be categorically superior. All their proofs could end. All of their miracles did come to an end. So, for example, when Sayyidina Isa raises the dead, how is anyone supposed to believe in that except through either you saw it or you believed the person who told you? Right? In comparison, the Quran is a sign of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that any one of us can read. None of us had to be there. No one has to trust a single individual about what the Quran is. No, you could read it for yourself. And that's why it's categorically superior. So when we say that the miracles of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam are categorically superior and greater than anyone else's miracles, you have to understand that this is not just boasting. There is a clear rational purpose behind it, which is that he's appealing, or his message is to more people. His ummah to da'wah, the ummah that he's doing da'wah to, are greater in number, wider spread in the world, and are unlimited in time. As a result, that sign has to be bigger. So when there's a sign for example, a local road, Your local street sign is this big. The little highway sign is this big. But when you're on the turnpike or the freeway or the parkway, those signs like New York 200 miles, that sign is much bigger because now you're appealing to everyone driving up from Florida and up from Atlanta to New York, right? You don't need signs that says Route 1 or Route 130. You don't need to see those signs. Those are local signs. You much less than see James Street or Patterson Street or Adams Street or Main Street. Those are even more local signs. So the smaller the appeal of a prophet, his ummah to dawah, the less his signs have to be. Okay? So that's the understanding of the miracles of a prophet, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, compared to the miracles of other prophets and messengers. All right, we have Dawud Walid today. We're going to talk about sacred activism, and we'll be bringing him on soon. Okay. Is following a madhab bid'ah, says Moberry. Moberry, you can watch our whole video series on madhab, and that whole video series essentially on madhab is it points to a very simple analysis. Number one, the verses of the Quran, they divide into two categories. There's actually a third one, but we're not going to mention, which is shabihat, right? So they do divide into qat'i and dhanni, which is verses that only have one meaning and do not need scholarship. Okay? Omar, kayfa haluk? You good? You taking school?
No, I had to go all the way to like North Jersey or something.
Oh, you want North Jersey what, to get dates for Ramadan?
Drop off a U-Haul truck.
Whoa.
To like, help with moving and
Right.
come from there too.
Right. There's some verses of Quran you don't need scholarship in. But and all of knowledge is like this, like 2 + 2. You don't need class for that. If you put a kid out there and you never gave him an education ever, which is a lot of people in the world, he'll know what 2 + 2 is. Right. Okay? But you can't expect him to know the square root of 2 plus the square root of 2. Because the square root of 2, that's something you need to study math. Someone has to educate you on math. Or you won't expect him to really off the top of his head know what 1/4 of a tenth of 40 is. Okay? 1/4 of a tenth of 40. Like that's going to take any one of us a little bit of processing, even like 10 seconds to process what 1/4 of a tenth of 40 is. So all knowledge, including the Quran, has two levels of it. One, it does not need scholarship. That's how people open the Quran and convert to Islam, right? They didn't need scholarship for that. But that person will never know how to do traveler's prayers unless someone teaches him, unless he thinks, he does research, right? So that second part, which is nadari, is the speculative verses of the Quran which require judgments by scholars. Okay? And that's the dhanni set of verses, and that's where schools of thought and valid interpretation exists. The multiplicity of different interpretations exist, right? So the first set of verses, the first set of teachings does not need any scholarship. You just read the Quran and you see it right there in front of you. If you go against that, that's what we call the sect. That's the divisive sect, and that's where your deeds start. You're not valid anymore, and some of them, you may not even be Muslim anymore. Which ones? Those which are known in religion by necessity. If it's known in religion by necessity, like 11-year-old boy knows it, 9-year-old boy knows it, 7-year-old girl would know this, and you go against it, now you are out of Islam. Because when someone converts to Islam, they convert to Islam based on the shahadatain and the general understanding of what this religion is. It's a religion that has prayer, fasting, Mecca, alcohol is forbidden, there's one God, one prophet, like that, right? You go into Islam with that. So what makes a person a murtad or a zindiq is negating what you entered Islam with. You entered Islam with not just shahadatain, the shahadatain and the basic default knowledge of what the word Islam connotates. Those teachings. So if you negate any one of those, one of the two shahadas or what is ma'lum min ad-din bid-darura, known in religion by necessity, of what the word Islam connotates, you're out of Islam. Okay? So that's why we have madhab. And the difference, and when one brother said, one time brought an analogy regarding perennialism. Perennialism is this idea that all these religions are all just relative, right? And they're pointing to the same truth. He said, you believe in madhab, and you hold them all to be valid, okay? So why are not the different aqa'id, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, also differences of opinion that are all valid? Well, the answer is that madhab are only interpreting speculative verses. They're all valid because the language allows them to be valid. But the qat'i verses, the language does not allow for any interpretations. Okay? So, I mean, when I tell you that, go get me a cup of Earl Grey tea. Get me a cup of Earl Grey tea. There are 4 or 5 different things that you could do that'll all be valid. Like, you can bring me the boiling water and a cup of Earl Grey with an Earl Grey tea bag in it and the sugar on the side. It's valid. You did exactly what I told you to do. Another guy goes and brings me, makes it himself, assuming with what I like, and brings it to me, mixed with the sugar and with the hot water. Another guy, so these 2 people, they both did something valid, right? Now another guy goes and he brings me jasmine tea. At that point, nothing you do after that. You can't bring me jasmine tea and then you bring me the prettiest tray, the prettiest cup, the most fine sugar. None of that matters, right? So that's like the zindiq, or the person of another faith, who does very well in his religion. The other guy gave me a foam cup, Earl Grey tea, the sugar was missing, and the hot water is not hot enough, right? But he fulfilled what I asked him to. It's not good, I'm not pleased with it, but he fulfilled what I asked him to. The other guy, perfect hot water, most organic sugar, the most expensive jasmine tea, beautiful cup, beautiful tray, right? But I cannot accept this. This is not what the order was. As much as you did a great job, it wasn't the order. It's got to be sent back to the kitchen. This is the difference between schools of thought and interpretation and completely incorrect beliefs, right? It's all about the language. All right, our guest is with us. Our brother and Imam, Dawud Walid out of Detroit. We're surrounded here with the folks from Atlanta, Georgia. We have some noble, beautiful brothers from Atlanta, Georgia watching. And now we go to another city, which is Detroit, Michigan. And let's bring our guest on, Imam Dawud Walid. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Tafaddal. Okay, so we need you to just center a little bit. There you go. Perfect. Perfect. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How are you? How's everything going?
Alhamdulillah, everything is fantastic. It's wonderful to see you. I haven't seen you since I ran across you in Mecca. It's really
Umrah, yeah. Alhamdulillah, mashallah. Those Umrah trips are great. You get to see, basically, you meet everybody in those winter Umrah trips. Now everyone's going in Thanksgiving because it's a bit cheaper. Now the Thanksgiving prices go up, right? So, but mashallah, welcome. Now you are in Detroit, correct?
Well, technically in Canton, which is a western suburb of Detroit, but yeah, it's in Metro Detroit. But actually,
overall Detroit area.
Overall Detroit area, yeah.
Very good, very good. And the population in Canton, is that a little bit more diverse, or is it like Detroit, mainly Yemeni?
No, the majority of Muslimin here are predominantly Indian and Pakistani. We do have some Arabs here, some West African immigrants, and some African Americans. But we're one of the more populated areas in Metro Detroit of Muslims after Hamtramck, Dearborn area. Then it would be Canton, which has a large population of Muslimin.
Okay, very good. And that seems to be more of the North American, culturally, what the North American Muslim community looks like. Detroit, it's unique, right? There's no other city that is predominantly Yemeni, except for Dearborn. So where you're at, Canton is predominantly Desi. That's pretty much falls within the average then, right?
Yeah, well, Dearborn is actually majority Lebanese.
Dearborn's Lebanese?
It's majority Lebanese. So you have
really? That's
Lebanese, Yemeniyin, and then Iraqiyin. So those are like the in that order. Yeah.
Okay, good. Your main work in Dawah regards activism through the framework of the Quran. Now, one question I've always wanted to ask that I believe we should begin with when we talk about activism. Activism is seeking to affect change, right? Seeking to affect in a democratic world where the people affect the change, right? We need to discuss power. And one of the things I find that is, like, I always want to say whenever I see a regular activist is, what is the source of power? Like a Muslim cannot be a materialist and only operate with what is visible to us. So that's what I want to ask you. The first question I want to ask you is, how would you answer an activist on the question of what is the source of power?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. So number one, and I've been talking with a number of activists and organizers a lot about this very thing, not this direct question, but trying to remind them that we as Muslims, we don't put overly amount of emphasis, though it's important, but we don't worship asbab, meaning that we don't worship actual means or physical means. The musabbab, we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is the Lord of the means, and that true empowerment and tawfiq comes from obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is, in a nutshell, it's not about numbers per se, it's about us seeking to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is the true source of power, empowerment, and strength. And what I've been saying a lot, actually in the first 2 months of my giving khutbah al-Jummah after October 7th, and I've not just here in Detroit, but I've been in Florida, Southern California, and some other areas of the country speaking. And I remind them that, you know, when there was the great revival of Islamic knowledge, like at the time of Hujjatul Islam, Al-Ghazali, rahimahullah ta'ala, and then we have Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jilani and Ibn Qudama al-Maqdisi, and these great giants in the establishment of the Futuwwa guilds in Iraq under the Abbasiyin, that, you know, Al-Quds was under occupation by the Crusaders. But when you read the works of these great scholars, they knew Al-Quds was under occupation, yet you won't see any mention about Crusaders or occupation in their books at that time, because they understood that, number one, the beliefs had to be corrected amongst the Muslims, and also the issue of tazkiyah, or we would say tasawwuf, that the people had to be purified. Once that work was done, then when Salahuddin al-Ayyubi came into Al-Quds, it's said that he only had 2 books with him, a Musaf al-Quran and a copy of Ihya al-Ulumuddin. And that was the secret of the Tahrir, or the liberation of Al-Quds. So I remind people, it's not about numbers per se. It's not about money or organizing. We need organizing. We need people to give, but it's more about, you know, number one, in our ubudiyah in general, we know Allah, number one. Number two, we learn what is pleasing to Allah and what is displeasing to Allah. And number three, we try to follow what is pleasing to Allah and just try to stay far away from that which displeases Allah. And this is how tawfiq comes. So this is why I tell activists.
That's where, when I see a lot of activists, and I blame it on the universities, because they go into these universities, take the Palestine classes, come out Marxists. That's the truth, right? Take the political science classes, right, in which the Palestine issue, they view it favorably. In other words, they are, viewing this as an apartheid. They're viewing it as a genocide. In this specific case, and before that, they view it as colonization of Eastern Europeans over a country that they have no business with, right? In general, but their view of power is atheistic. Their view of all they view is the material. And when I see a group of people trying to have success for an Islamic cause, and Allah's name never comes up once, nor is they giving him any attention, I just ask myself, how do you expect to get victory? With what are you going to get victory? With your own selves, right? So this idea of paying attention to where the real source of power is, I think, is it's the number one pillar of what this term sacred activism has to entail, right? And if that's the case, when we pay attention to Allah, that involves our own personal selves half the time and our work half the time. And that's the meaning of monks by night and nights by day. Nights by day, monks by night. That was a saying of a Christian, a Byzantine spy, when he went back to the emperor and was asked, tell me about Umar ibn Khattab's people. Like, why is Umar Khattab winning so many wars? Why is he succeeding over these massive empires? He said, all I can summarize his people is that they're knights by day and they're monks by night. Umar ibn Khattab himself was asked, when does he sleep? He said, maybe the afternoon nap, when the sun is so hot and everyone runs home. Maybe he gets to sleep under a shade of a tree for a qaylula. He says, because if I sleep in the day, I lose the rights of the people. The people have rights over me as their khalifa. And if I sleep by night, those are the huquq of Allah. Those are the rights of Allah. I lose my Lord's, the worship that my Lord is due. So that's really the number one issue here. And the idea of paying attention to the real source of power. So if we do that in our day today, in our world today, how would the Palestine movement look in your view? The movement we're going to discuss the phrase "Free Palestine" in a second. We're going to discuss that in a second, but let us just use it for this for the sake of what we're talking about. How would that movement look like today?
Well, it looked like night and day, to be honest with you, Sayyidi.
Night and day, subhanAllah.
Night and day.
Yeah.
And actually, prior to this this new Nakba that's taken place, I went to Cairo, and I was Sheikh Ahmed al-Azhari, Hafidhullah Ta'ala. And we went for a majlis and had dinner and discussed a number of issues with Habib Alie, Hafidhullah Ta'ala, in Cairo. And what Habib Alie suggested to me is that he said, look, you need to teach your book towards sacred activism and your book on Futuwwa together. They should not be taught separately, right? And he said that part of the issue is that, and he said this, he says, many of you in America, and he actually said, you American Muslims are actually different from the British Muslims, meaning that he believed that we're more loose in regards to our adherence to certain principles that are our politics. He says, you all would get much more done that's beneficial and did a lot less outward work if there were two things. He said, number one, if your activism was conformed to the Sharia, to the sacred law. And then number two, if the people took more time to purify themselves to get murshideen, and that 85% of their activism was actually qiyamul layl and tahajjud. He said you see much more success as a community. But he said, but many times
you get laughed at. You say this to some of these Marxists,
well,
and some of them, I have to say, there's a gradient, right? There's a gradient, and I do have optimism that there is, according to Abdullah Aqil, that there is a change, but it's a gradient. Right, it's a gradient. So just so people don't think that that my perception of the world is just awliya and Marxists. No, I'm saying those are the extremes, right? And it's really got to lean, and one side's got to be eliminated altogether. Continue.
Yeah. So Habib Alie, and he actually does know a lot about what's going on here, probably from his students and keeping up with things. I actually was quite surprised that he knew about a lot of things going on. But for instance, this whole idea that thinking that we are going to liberate Palestine by aligning with Qawm Huruf.
Yeah.
Like the Hurufi movement. So I said this to Habib Alie because he was asking about some of the problems we have, and I was mentioning this, and he said like Qawm Huruf. I said yeah. I said to him, la, ta, ba, gim, qaf, wa kada, right? Yeah. So then obviously he knew what I was talking about then. So for instance, to have a march or a protest on a college campus like this happened here, and you're going to liberate Palestine, and the way not to do it is to have Muslims and muhajibat screaming profanity, saying F the police, and they say, I want to introduce, like the Muslims are running the platform. It's different if someone else is running the platform. Then the Muslims are running the platform, and then you want to invite the LGBTQ Student Alliance because they talk about freeing Palestine. This is the very type of neo-Marxist, and critical theory comes out of Marxism, by the way, which influences this whole thing. This whole like intersectionality of sexuality with gender, with ethnicity. It's a hodgepodge of things.
And if I could clarify that for everyone too, it's also a paradigm of haves and have-nots.
Yeah.
But now it's in every category. There's haves and have-nots in every category, and the have-nots have to wrestle power, or they have to get justice from the haves, right? But now it's not just the sources of wealth and production. It's every category. Every possible category has a have and a have-not, and the have-nots are morally entitled just by virtue, and they're morally superior just by virtue of being a have-not.
Correct. So so some people may accuse of saying, well, what does this have to do with anything? This is moralizing. Well, we as Muslimin, we should respect everyone's humanity. But there is no quid pro quo activism, because what also goes along this, there's strings attached to this so-called solidarity, because they say they're a marginalized, oppressed community. And then we as Muslims and Arabs, we're the marginalized, oppressed community. So we're supposed to be in solidarity. So then this is, well, okay, they came to this. You're supposed to then, as a Muslim, advocate for and be okay with. I'll give you an example. My daughter goes to a university here in Michigan. I pulled her out of the dorm. She lives at home now. Why? Because she's on a female-only dorm. And after this dumb law passed last year in Michigan, she's on a female-only floor. And this person claiming to be a trans woman is in the dorm. My daughter gets out of the shower and comes, and there's a guy standing outside the shower. Then the next day she goes into the bathroom to go and freshen up, and a guy who claims to be gender neutral. And you know, I'm a big guy, Cede. I'm 6'1" and 220 pounds. Who's bigger than me walks into the woman's bathroom. So like my daughter is like, she can't be staying on campus, right? But we have Muslims that say, oh, you're transphobic. You know, these are our allies. This same person came and we gave him the mic to talk about Palestine. Yeah. You know, so this is a problem.
Let's go back to one of these things. And if you're on Instagram, hop over to YouTube so you can see us both at the Safina Society channel, and you can subscribe to the channel and like the channel so that you can get information on it. What is the Hurufi movement? Is a question here. The Hurufi movement is a movement that we don't want to mention it because we're going to get banned. Basically, the Ligbit Q is another way to put it. Let's talk about this issue of within critical theory, that merely being in the minority elevates you morally, and that just because a group is in the minority, as if nothing they can do is blameworthy at that point, and any blame of them is blaming the victim. That's always a handcuff that you put on people, or that this ideology puts on people. Can you tell us that, is it possible for a group, and expound upon the possibility of a group to be a minority, but also to be wrong about something, or to be oppressed in one element of life, but also blameworthy in another element of life?
Well, it's clear when we start. I mean, the best place to start is Kitabullah, right? Like, these are not mutually exclusive identities. One can be from a group that's mathluma, and an individual can be dhalim. So, for instance, we know that Nabiullah Musa alayhi salam came to rush in to saw a dispute with one of his people who was an Egyptian. With an Israeli with an Egyptian. Yeah. He came to help this person, and in the process, he accidentally he struck them and accidentally killed him. Yeah. Then the next day, he saw the same man getting involved in fitna, and he realized that his own person, who was Kibti, who was an Egyptian, I mean, excuse me, wasn't an Israeli. He actually was the wrong he was stirring up the wrong, even though
Yeah.
the Israeli people were oppressed people and had been enslaved in Egypt, right? So we even have this example in the Quran. But for instance, um, we know that in the United States of America, that historically speaking, African Americans came here, were brought here, taken away from our deen, our names were stripped, were treated as chattel, like chicken and cows. We have Jim Crow, all of these things, right? At the same time, this doesn't give someone black the excuse to be anti-white. Right. So, for instance, I got off of social media about 3 years ago simply because there was a discussion in a convert group somewhere, and Ustad Joe Bradford
Yeah.
was speaking, and some young Muslims started to cuss him out and say that he couldn't speak about, converts going through this because he's a white male, so it's white male patriarchy. And like these young sisters are like using profanity at him. I said it was wrong. And then I got accused of being an arm of white supremacy. Like what's wrong is wrong. Like,
Yeah.
the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam clearly said, "La fadl al-Arabiyin ala al-Ajami, wa al-Ajami ala al-Arabi, wa la aswad al-ahmar, wa la ahmar al-aswad illa bi-taqwa." So the black is not better than the red or the white, right? So the virtue is in piety,
Yeah.
right? So a black person doesn't have license just because of historical harms that have been done by the broader society to be racist against individual white people, or to try to cancel someone in the Muslim community because they make a mistake. It's almost like a type of social political takfir
Yeah.
that takes place in our community.
Well,
That's wrong.
You're right. And the Marxists, they have a sense of justice. They believe that there's right and wrong, but they make takfir, they cancel people, right? And sometimes some Muslims they adopt some of these ideas, right, as law. And I'm telling you, there are some people that I know who have cut others off solely on the fact that that person has a relationship with law enforcement, because in their position and their conclusion is that all of law enforcement is corrupt, and therefore they've essentially treated it the way we would treat a mubtadi' sect, right? A group of people that have contradicted an explicit verse of Quran. When someone contradicts an explicit verse of Quran and says, "This is my position," we say, "Okay, we're not keeping your company. We are disavowing from you." But they've treated this matter, which is a judgment call. It's a judgment call how much you blame law enforcement and how much you interact with law enforcement. At the end of the day, it's a judgment call based on different amounts of information. Okay. But they elevate that to what we would consider wala and bara. Wala and bara is when Allah says you must be loyal to this group. This is your support group. You have to, or a group that you must support. And bara is you must disavow from this group. And we don't disavow on matters of opinion. Even a terrible judgment call, misguided judgment call, as long as it's within the realm of judgment, I can disagree all I want, voice my disagreement, but I don't cut that person off, treat them like they're canceled, treat them like they've got some kind of a disease, and then we bash them, and then all is halal now at this point. If you notice with these types, everything is halal, all cursing you, making fun of you, throwing you under the bus. Everything becomes halal with this group. There's some of the worst attributes and akhlaq comes out of these types of people while they're also professing being Muslim. So this is a group of people who are our brothers and sisters, but they need someone needs to point this out to them, that your mizan, your scale.
I'll give you a tangible result, Shadee. So, for instance, I had a falling out with a prominent activist over something like this. So you mentioned, and like really, you're talking about the language of qati and dhanni, basically, right? Yeah. There are a lot of things that are
speculative and definitive. Those are the language we're talking about.
Imam being involved in CVE,
yeah,
counter-violent extremist program, and working with the FBI to stop Homeland Security, right? I'm against this,
yeah,
right? But if another imam or someone who's senior to me, who's a sheikh, think that there's some sort of benefit, that it's stopping some sort of harm that's coming to the community, or if they're serving a community, for instance, where some youth have gone to join Shabab in Somalia, for instance, right?
Yeah.
Okay, this is something that's speculative, and I can
Yeah.
strongly disagree, but I'm not going to cancel this sheikh and still have good relations. So one activist basically called this sheikh, who, I'm not going to mention his name, but we would know him, basically called him a sellout and all these things, like an Uncle Tom, and he meets with these people and these people, right?
They burned the whole thing.
Now this same activist basically has said that sex work in their state should be decriminalized, and in their city should be decriminalized, because the law against sex work is part of straight white male patriarchy and my body, my choice.
Wow.
So this is something to sell one's body in zina is clearly prohibited, but now it's something speculative about whether you sit and talk with Homeland Security, and then like my body, my choice is deceptive language, because for us as Muslims, our bodies are an amana to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like we're mamlukin, and he's a malik.
Yeah.
Our bodies belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So like my body, my choice. Yeah, we have the choice we have ikhtiyar. We can choose to disobey, and we could be punished for that.
Yeah.
But to say my body, my choice, this is foolishness.
It's actually completely false.
Yeah, it's false.
You actually, it's you have the choice to do what you want in what you purchased or produced in a factory or in a shop. So did you produce it, your body, or did you buy your body? Not neither, right? It was given to you. If it's given to you, someone gave it to you. That means that person has rights over you. They can take it back. They can tell you what to do with it, etc. It's an aman. I go into my house and my driveway and I find a car, and then I walk home. Enter the house, and in the kitchen table there's a key there, right? And a note. Use it only to go to work. This is not my car, right? It's not my car, right? Park it where you want, change the rims all you want. It's written there. But only take it to work. That's the rules of the car, right? If someone asks me, hey, you got this car? Yeah. Do you drive it? Yeah. But come with us to New York. Let's go. No, I can't, right? There are rules. I didn't buy this car, nor did I make this car. This is the same logic with the human body. You didn't make it. You didn't buy it. You don't own it, right? Name me one other thing that you didn't make, that you didn't buy, that you own. Nothing. Even nature. You have to follow Allah's rules. You chop down a tree, you can't use it to burn someone's house down. You can only use it where Allah told you to use it, buying and selling. Let's turn to another question here. We need our voices to be heard, okay? So an Egyptian actor and a musician, he's almost like the DJ Khaled of Egypt. It's like one of these DJs, and he's a rapper, and he does everything. But he got fed up with these activists. He doesn't even pray or anything. But he said the right thing, right? When this Palestine thing was happening, and everyone says, forward this so our voices can be heard. He said, heard by whom? Right? Who's going to hear our voices? Who is going to help us? The only voice to be heard is our government, who will then wage war and go free the Palestinians, or the Creator, if our government doesn't move, or the Creator. So why don't we talk a little bit about the concept of make our voices be heard? Maybe I'm wrong. There could be possibly some element where making the public know about something has value. Maybe that, I'm sure there is to a degree, but there's constantly make our voices be heard. We got this. It gives a lot of power, in my view, to people, where people, in my view, have very little power. So why don't you talk a little bit about that and correct me if I'm wrong about this.
So Shadee, in my opinion, we talk about the issue of enjoying the good and forbidding the evil, which I think lays into or resides in sometimes having our voices being heard. But number one, what are we saying? And number two, what are the means? And then to what level of responsibility. Is this a fardun kifaya or this become a fardun ayn? Right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَتَكُمْ مِنْكُمْ أُمَّةٌ إِلَى الْخَيْرِ يَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنكَرِ وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ. So this is fardun kifaya. And Imam Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, this ayah, that there be from you a group that calls towards khair. So number one, we've neglected giving da'wah.
Yeah.
That should be the first thing. We're raising our voices with people and raising our voices to the public, not just in our actions and our akhlaq, but in our words. We should be telling the people about this deen. Balughu anni walau ayah, right? Each and every Muslim amongst what they've been given permission and knowledge, in fact, has been given idhn by the Prophet ﷺ, and that which they know and understand that it should be conveyed. Hadith sahih. Then enjoin what is good and forbid what is evil. And these will be the successful people. So this is a communal obligation, meaning that everyone doesn't need to be in the streets raising their voices. Everyone doesn't need to be on the stage. Everyone doesn't even need to be posting, making comments about every single thing, even on social media, I believe. Now, it does become an individual responsibility, I believe, that if we know something clearly is wrong, right, that we do raise our voices within a controlled capacity following Islamic leadership and those talking points. For instance, Palestine is an issue for the Ummah, of course. It's also an American issue in general. And the reason is our taxpayer dollars, I mean, this is so ajib, right? We're dropping a few tons of food in there, but we fund it and given them all the bombs that have killed over 30,000 people. Even bombs have been dropped on masajid and churches as well as
That's what they call talking out of both sides of your mouth.
Yeah. Sharr nas dhul wajhain.
Yeah.
Okay. So we as Muslims, but also as citizens, should call our Congress people, I believe, and say, look, you work for us. We don't want you voting on these appropriation bills. And if you continue to do this, we're going to vote against you. And like just last week, you know, the Michigan Muslim community did something unprecedented with the uncommitted vote, over 100,000 votes. And basically, we had unity between the masajid and the religious people and the secular, like neo-Marxist Muslims, right? We had some sort of unity. So our voices were heard on this issue in relationship to uncommitted. So sometimes voting can be a way of expressing one's voice as well. Now, I want to say this too, right, in regards to the elections in general. Some people will say, oh, well, we have to vote for 46 because 45 is so bad and he's a white supremacist and all this stuff. One of my friends who's a Nigerian, who's a sheikh, he says, you know, he says, American Muslims are strange. It's like sometimes we make the argument, I don't like shaitan, so I have to vote for Dajjal. and sometimes we talk about maslaha mafsada. There is no clear, better one. And in fact, when it comes to our religious liberties and our First Amendment rights, the progressives and liberals, the Democrats are worse than Republicans. They're worse. They're worse. So, I mean, we have to weigh things. But this whole thing about, well, we have to let our voices be heard. There's a way of doing that. But I also want to bring in that element as well, because, you know, there are some people who are saying, well, you know, we voted uncommitted in Michigan and these other states. But when it comes to the general election, you know, Trump is just so scary and bad. And I mean, I don't think any of them are moral individuals, and very rarely can you find a moral politician anyway, such as Sheikh Yusuf Sadiq, Hafilat al-Azhari. You had him on your show. Alhamdulillah, he made a beautiful statement to Muslims in general. He said Muslims, the general Muslim, like an army, shouldn't be involved in politics directly anyway. He said, if you're going to be a politician involved in politics, the only way you can do it is to be a Sufi and have a sheikh. And said, even still, you're still going to make mistakes. Yeah. But for a general Muslim who doesn't have a sheikh or a murabbi and has no tasawwuf, politics is could not only be problematic and sinful, it could cause people to go into spiritual crises.
And that's because there's a lot of power in politics, and power is a great temptation. Some have even said being in charge is a greater temptation than wealth, women, and anything else, and intoxicants like alcohol. Some of the ulama have said that the last love that leaves your heart is the desire to be in charge or to have influence, because even the Zahid, I think it was Sufyan al-Thawri, who there was a Zahid in Mecca al-Mukarramah, a Zahid. He lived in a hut and worshipped Allah all day and night, and he wouldn't visit him. So they asked him, why don't you visit him? He said, this man, he's ascetic. He's an ascetic in his home and in his clothes and in his food. But criticize him once and take the attention of the people away from him, right? And see what kind of reaction you get. In other words, he was still in love with the idea of mystical influence over people or spiritual power, right? He loved the idea that he has this reputation of an ascetic and a mystic, and that everyone comes to seek blessings from him, and the governor comes to visit him, and everyone visits him, right? So that it's that love of that influence, it's extremely intoxicating, and it's so hard to get out of the heart. So that's why you mentioned spirituality in relation to politics, because politics is a very, very strong magnetic temptation of power, right? So let me ask you this now. Do you believe that it's fair to say that no two Muslims should really have strong opinions on whether or not to support Biden or Trump? Because in both cases, there is no clear answer to who's worse. Nobody should say the better of two options, the less evil of both options. There can be an argument why Biden's worse, an argument why Trump's worse. In each way, it's a judgment call. And as a result of that, in our fiqh, in our sharia, no, we don't separate or fight or have arguments or personally differ, I should say, on matters of judgment calls. Is that a fair assessment of the matter?
Yeah, I would say it's a fair assessment. And I look at this. I look at it this way. This is from talking with my teachers, and from my own deliberation. That if we were to most of our political organizing organizations, they have no metrics on how we should vote for people. Most of it's based on how we should vote, like who we should vote for, or how do we prioritize issues. For the general people, it's based upon feelings. For some organizations, it is who funds you runs you, because we have some organizations in our community that 90% to 100% of them are funded by outside money. They're not funded within our community. So I would just say, in general advice for any of you Muslims, you look at a big activist, or you look at a certain organization claiming on speaking behalf us politically, follow the money, because who funds you runs you.
100%. That's easy.
This should be a general practice. Now, if we take the 5 principles of Maqasid Sharia, Hizb al-Din for us in America, I believe, is the number one maqsad.
Hizb al-Din,
Hizb al-Din, the protection of our deen. Then we have Hizb al-Nafs, our lives, Hizb al-Aql, Hizb al-Mal, Hizb al-Nasl. So we have priorities. Then we have on the other hand, we have ad-dururiyat, wal-hajiyat, wa-tahsiniyat. So we have these principles. Basically, we can say, what are absolute necessities, life or death situations?
You said daruriyat,
al-hajiyat,
and
at-tahsiniyat.
All right. Before you continue, let me give a summary to everyone watching. And if you're watching on Instagram, hop over to Safina Saadi's YouTube channel. What Imam just said is that our religion, the purpose of religion is to preserve 5 things: faith, deen, the religion itself, life, wealth, intellect, and lineages. In other words, to know who's born from whom. And then he said, when we assess issues, we assess them based upon whether they are life and death needs, dire needs, which is like Your eyes. You can still live without your eyes, but that is a dire need, life altering. You losing your home, that's life altering. Being put in jail, that's life altering. Life altering versus life and death. So that's the second category. The third category is that which improves your life. So to move from a house with no air condition, you move to get some air condition. These are tahsiniyat, things that would improve your life, like even we can say dramatically. But your life is not altered without it, and you definitely won't die from it. All right, so continue.
Thank you. I should have translated those terms myself.
No problem.
No problem. So if we take these objectives and then take these three standards, if we looked at our local and state issues, our national issues, and the international issues, if we took these two things, we could then come up with a metrics of how we actually prioritize things, and we can look at the candidates and see how they fit into this metrics. Then we can make a less emotional decision and say, oh, Trump is just so bad, and he banned 5 Muslim countries of people being able to get asylum, so therefore we can't vote for him. Or if we say, oh, well, Biden is a miscreant and he has been aiding Israel commit genocide, so we can't vote for him. Which, by the way, we shouldn't vote for anyone who is actively involved in aiding and abetting the murder of Muslims. General, I don't care how good he is on other issues. We're not to give a hand or give aid to that person, right? No campaign contributions, nothing, right? But then if we have this at least starting like at the state level, federal level, our Congress people, then we can make a more educated guess than just saying, oh, Fulan bin Fulan's with this party, or Fulan bin Fulan is this color. Oh, he's a person of color. She's a woman of color, or she's Muslim, or he's Muslim, or Arab. I don't even believe on voting for someone just because they're Muslim. Like this whole thing about being seen, or we have so many more Muslim politicians now. Yeah. I don't see that as a fadl or a virtue in and of itself. It is, what are the standards that person is promoting in the political realm? What are they advocating for? That's what they're graded upon, not whether because they have an Arabic name, or if their parents immigrated from the quote unquote bilad. That doesn't mean anything to me.
I agree, and the proof of that is that we can probably list and point to 60 countries where the entire government's Muslims, and you wouldn't want to spend 2 minutes in these rotten countries. No offense to the Muslims and to the Ummah, but these are countries that are corrupt. You could be thrown to jail for no reason. I remember one guy, he was an Egyptian, he went to Egypt. He started going to the masajid and donating to causes and stuff like that. When he got to Egypt, he got arrested, right? And he got thrown in jail, right? And he said to the guard, "Where's my phone call?" Right? "I get to call my lawyer." The guard just laughed, right? What a naive human being. Okay, you're not in one of these other countries that you have rights. You don't have rights. So those countries are run 100% by Muslims in some cases, and you wouldn't want to live there. Okay, would you rather go and be arrested in Cairo or arrested in New York? I'll get arrested in New York. These kuffar with their kufri rules, they're going to give me the rights of their kufri rules. These Muslims with their sharia, they're not follow it, right? I'm going to go with the guy who follows, who, if I get the book, I can study the book and I can win, right? I can figure out how to get my rights, because whatever they go by, their false book or whatever it is, they follow it. It's predictable, right? I just talked to a brother who said, what about some of these racist townships? They won't give Muslims permits, right? He's a builder. He's built more than 700 structures across 5 different states. He said, no, what are you talking about? If it's by the rules, they have to, because then they get sued for not giving you your rights according to the book. This is the value of a people, whether they're on the right law or the wrong law, who go by the book. You go to Egypt, they got the best book and they don't follow it. Or Tunisia, Morocco, Maghreb, they're all the same, right? They got the best book and they don't follow it. So which one do you want to go to? Which one do you want to be tested by and go to court with? So the idea of we need to have a Muslim in here and we need visibility, we got plenty of visibility in the United Nations. No one respects those Muslim countries. So I'm totally in agreement with you. It's about what the person's bringing forth, not just the identity of Muslims. We got even to the point that a Muslim sister was interviewed in Playboy, and we celebrated first Muslim sister in Playboy. What are we talking about here, right? How absurd is that? Okay. Let me bring another question to you. The question of, there was a question here that I wanted to ask. The question of how you've been received now, you know, in the activist world with your ideas, which I agree with 100%. Have you found any that you've changed the ideas of some of those who were more left leaning to bring them back to the Quran?
So yeah, we've been teaching this book for a few years now, and there's been some other honorable people who've been online and taught it online as well as in person, like Sheikh Jamal Diwan, for instance. May Allah preserve him. And we have seen with some younger people who've engaged in this and sat and talked, that I've seen a shift in some of them, right? Where some of them were real woke and out there, and they've come more to the center. And like many of them, like I see them, like I see some of them Laylatul Jum'ah, like every Thursday at the Sirah and Salawat with Sheikh Abdul Karim Yahya at Dar Rahma, the Zawiya, right? And some of these young people. So we have seen it, but these are predominantly the younger people and not the professional activists or professional organizers. The professional activists and the professional organizers who are older, many of them find at best some of these things I say unstrategic. I've been told this unstrategic, or to say that we should not support people who are propagating haram platforms that's so-called moralizing. Like we don't have time to moralize right now, right? So I've heard this type of language, and unfortunately, there's even a couple of people who I used to work closely with on some things. We don't even talk anymore, unfortunately. So, which is unfortunate, and even to the extent of some sisters who happen to be Black who have accused me of being an arm of white supremacy. Unfortunately.
What do you think of the philosophy that?
Because if you don't affirm this whole paradigm of power dynamics that you're talking about in the underpinnings of critical race theory that go beyond just a legal theory in court but become a social dynamic, then to critique or criticize that must mean that you are an agent of white supremacy. So that's the logical conclusion of those individuals, unfortunately. And you know, these same people, though, you know, I prayed and made dua, Wallah al-Azim, making tawaf, even though some of these people have canceled me, those that I know their names, I've actually prayed for them while making tawaf around the Kaaba. Because just because someone from our Futuwwa, just because someone curses us or slanders us, that our reaction should be to pardon them and to pray for their hidayah. So I'm trying to. It's not easy all the time, Sayyidi, but we try to practice what we preach.
And the key here is that critical theory has been taken as a aqidah, not a strategy, not a political thought. It's a aqidah. So if you contradict it or if you go against any of its principles or any of its ideas, you're going to be treated like an apostate, essentially. You're going to be treated as one, as a kafir, for example. Let's talk about this. What do you think of the philosophy that neither of these political parties do we have any space with them, nor is there really any avenue to affect certain changes at the national level of policy? Why are we even bothering with this? Why don't we just go to the grassroots and affect change amongst in the culture of the people? You can alter policies, but you can also alter the culture by spreading Islam to regular people. And regular people go home to their families, and that becomes a memory for their kids. And it becomes something that their kids take on, and it becomes widespread amongst regular, politically insignificant people But what you end up doing after a generation is altering the culture, right? What do you think of that philosophy?
So I agree with that and add something on. So we know a hadith that raised the level of Aziz, that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, "Jubilat qulubun ala hubbin min asna ilayha." Their hearts naturally inclined to love whoever does good for them, right? So we do good not to win over people. We should be doing good, seeking the pleasure of Allah Azza wa Jal. At the same time, we know as a byproduct of that, that our doing good and bringing benefit to the people is going to soften their hearts towards us and towards Islam, because we are Muslims, and we're being unapologetic Muslims in the true sense. We're standing by our virtues and our values, not just as some sort of quasi-ethnic socio-political identity. So yeah, I believe totally in doing good for the people, not just treating neighbors well, feeding the people, helping bring safety to communities. I mean, subhanAllah, we look at the likes of our elders in many communities, like what Imam Zaid did back in the day, Hafillah Ta'ala did in Connecticut, Imam Siraj Wahaj. These are people that helped establish places of worship and literally cleaned up drug-infested neighborhoods, and then property values went up and people feel safest on the Muslim block.
Yeah.
Right? This is bringing actual benefit to the people, right? And people who used to sell drugs will now in a few nights be standing in the first Safa Taraweeh. They used to be crack dealers.
Yeah.
Right. We know many stories like this, right? They're bringing benefit to the people, not just in urban areas, but suburban areas, and inviting people to Islam. And we should be, instead of seeking to be accepted by everyone else, we should be calling them towards what we believe.
Yeah.
Instead of people pleasing. The second thing is, even politically, and I believe that there should be political engagement. The late Speaker of the House from Massachusetts, Tip O'Neill, he's a famous saying that says, all politics is local. And what really starts, and we focus too much on national elections, who is on your school board, this determines what the curriculum is of school. If you're having not only racist books, but you're having sexually deviant books in your school about bathrooms, locker rooms, like the quality of your school, certain programs, after school activities. This relates to school board. What's your city council, your mayor? This relates to your city services, from your policing to your city services, like picking up rubbish and things like this. These are things that affect our day-to-day lives. Right? Who your senator isn't really affecting your day-to-day life as much as your state representative, but who is on your school board, who's on your planning commission, who is on your city council. And I think that we would be better to focus on that. And look at in my area, Hamtramck, Michigan, Muslims did this. We have now a Muslim mayor, and everyone on the city councils are practicing Muslim. I know them. Actually, the mayor of Hamtramck, a Yemeni brother, he actually used to be my personal physician. He would give me my annual physical. I could pick up the phone and call the mayor and city council. These are people we see at Khutbah al-Jum'ah. We see them at Taraweeh, right? But this started locally. Now we just got a Muslim police chief.
SubhanAllah.
So I mean, this to me is where the real, if we're going to talk about politics, right? And now we have people in here who can, we help work to block a liquor store getting opened up across the street from a masjid. Inshallah, we're going to get rid of the weed dispensaries. But this is the local politics.
And you actually ended up that same district or the same town banned all flags except the U.S. flag, right?
The U.S.
Which ended
flag
up banning the pride flag, right?
Right, but the U.S. flag and state flag are the two flags. But
the state flag too,
But in Hamtramck, you can hear the adhan 5 times a day all throughout the township. All the masajid, you can be waking up in time for suhoor.
Ajib.
You hear, so
SubhanAllah.
But this is where the local organizing and look, the township is still like 45% not Muslim. But people people appreciate the Muslims, and even their property values have gone up in certain streets and areas because the Muslims came and they cleaned up the neighborhood.
I think that's where we're headed in the future, because the Dallas guys, you know, Epic and these places and those towns around there. What are some of these towns called? Irving, Valley Ranch, and these towns, they're eventually going to have extremely a lot of an extreme amount of influence, a lot of influence over the local township rules. Like, what do they call these blue collar laws, or these, you know, basic local town rules? And also daily life will be affected, because when you have population, certain population that has a teaching, theft is going to go down, right? Car theft, which is going crazy in Toronto. If you look up Google car theft in Toronto, it's out of this world, right? But I wonder if it's the same in Mississauga as other suburbs where there's a lot of Muslims who have a teaching. So actual daily life is altered just by population. And that's where I like this idea that politics is more local in reality than elsewhere. So why don't we open up to comments and questions from people here and see what
I have
what
to
they have
get
to
going
say.
in 15 minutes max.
You got 15 minutes.
3, but I can stay until 3:10, inshallah, Sayyidi.
Okay, sounds good. Give me this question here. What does it say? Recommendations for raising young sons where Islamic school is not affordable.
Raising sons where Islamic school is not affordable. Well, I would say number one, like, are they living close by to Muslims? If they are not living close by to a Muslim community, they should try to move close by to a community in a Jama'ah, even if they are downgrading the size of their home. And I've told this to many people, like, you know, you don't want to live out in this big house out in suburbia, and there's very few Muslims, and you end up losing your children. It's better for you to come and live around the community.
Yeah.
Number two, if we look at the establishment of the Futuwwa guilds under the Abbasi Khalifa, Nasr al-Din, you'll see that when the Futuwwa guilds were started, and this was during the time of Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jilani al-Hanbali, that you'll see that it was a gradation of where you had young males, so they come into the guild around 15. Then there was another younger man that was a little bit older that would help kind of like steer them or look after them. But then there would be the murshid. So it's almost like having a murshid and a muqaddim or representative. And then you have the young student. So there was a type of instillment of manners, etiquettes, and also what we could say virtues or akhlaq. But in this, there's a level of discipline and order that's given, like rigor, like young children, but especially young males, need to be put forth some sort of rigor in order to be men. And part of the problem too is that I feel we have too many softies in our community. They've been pampered too much. They're given too much comfort. And this is like part of the reason why Sheikh Abdullah al-Mahmoudi and I are playing in December. We'll publicly announce it in Ramadan, but we plan on, inshallah, in December, taking a group of young men and flying into Jeddah and going to Mecca for 2 nights. And then we plan on doing the walk, 280 miles, to walk the same path that the Prophet and Abu Bakr Siddiq Radhiyallahu walked from Mecca to Medina. Imam Dawud Yassin just did it in January. We spoke with him, Sheikh Wasim in the UK. So there's some people that have already done it. So young men need to be put amongst young men with some discipline and some structure. And so maybe you can't afford the Islamic school, but try to find the environment. And then if you don't live close by the environment and can't afford to move, then look for those opportunities in those places where there's some actual like training of young males are going. Even if it's for the summertime, we have camps here in Detroit. You can send them with like here Sheikh Abdul Karim Yahya, Imam Amin Muhammad Malang City comes up, and we have camps. At least bring them somewhere so they can be around some men and give them some discipline and
I
toughen them up a little bit.
I have an idea to combine that with the walk, because the hijra walk is not right. The hijra, it's not a hijra walk. You're not making hijra. You're not running away from anyone. The real hijra walk is to say, here you are in Mecca. You get a 3-day head start. However you get to Medina, after 3 days, a band of people, 10 guys, are going to come after you. And if they catch you, they're gonna spray you down with water guns. They're gonna shoot you with water guns and roll you in the sand until you got sand all over yourself. And they have to run away from those people. That is actually more mimicking the spirit of the hijrah. You got 3 days to get to Medina, no cars, no trains, right? You got 3-day head start to get to Medina. What do you think of that one?
Yeah,
a band of people.
I think we'll start off slow, but actually
Start
sounds like
off
a good idea. But
a band of people. Listen, they cannot, they can't bruise you or cut your skin, but they could wrestle you down, tackle you down, wet you, okay, and roll you in the sand, okay? I mean, how miserable is that going to be? They're not going to kill you. They're not going to punch you, right? But they're going to do that as, you know, in replacement of what was really happening in the hijrah.
Well, I like the physical part, and this is why this past summer, when Brother Yasser Sayed and I, we held the Futuwwa camp in Pennsylvania, close to Breezewood. Actually, some of your students from Safina Society, a couple of them actually went. Yeah. And we actually had a grappling session where we had them grappling in the sand. Yeah. In the summer. So yeah, everyone needs. I grew up, you know, doing martial arts and also played football. You know, everyone needs to be, I think it's a rite of passage for every young man needs to be punched in his stomach or thrown on his back. Yeah. You know, it's something humbling about that, you know, but
there was a head of school that said that no one in the school is allowed to touch anyone else. So I said, but that's not good that you want to have the guys need to be physical with each other. Yeah. And they replied, they said, I agree with you, but not on our premises because we don't have the insurance to cover an accident, right? So I said, okay, good. As long as you agree with that, it's a fair rule, not on our premises because people sue these days. Fine. But as a philosophy, it's extremely good for guys to be brought up in some kind of a rough sport or a physical sport where they realize, hold on a second, getting smashed is it's not even that big of a deal, right? It doesn't hurt as bad as you imagine it, you know, to be. So there's a last question for you before you have to go. The woke life and the woke philosophy is getting so far out of hand to the point that basically what you mentioned, that Muslims advocating sex work, let alone all the other insanities with gender. At what point do you think this thing is coming to an end? When is it going to implode?
Well, we don't know when that actual moment will come. What we have from the vigorously authenticated hadith on the authority of Khadim Rasul Anas ibn Malik, he said that of the signs of the times, the end of times, the Prophet ﷺ said this, that there will be a decrease of ilm, of knowledge, and that predominant will be jahl. Then there'll be the predominance of sexual immorality, zina, but sexual immorality in general. Then what? Then there will be an increase in women and a decrease in men until there will be 50 imra'a, 50 women for every qayyimu wahid, for every one real man. Right?
Subhanallah.
And so these are the signs of the end of time. And where I see things going right now is I don't see a lot of men being real men. Mm-hmm. And I put the responsibility and the burden on us as men that we have to come back and to the wasatiyah, to the middle ground. We're not supposed to be brutes, but we have too many softies in our community. Yeah. So now what's going on is that I believe that in many of our spaces, and especially at the woke left, many of our sisters are being exploited. Yeah. Many of our sisters are being exploited through this movement and being used, and they don't even know they're being used. Yeah. Right, for other people's interests. And I'm concerned that at some point in time in the near future, without divine intervention,
Yeah.
that the American Muslim community is going to start looking like the Jewish American community, where we have a so-called liberal or like progressive reformist Judaism. It's going to be a shell of like standing to any sacred law. It's not going to have any tasawwuf. It's going to be more of like a Jewish identity. And then we're going to have other people over here who are the conservative or the ultra orthodox, in which there is a fissure in their community. And basically for the Jewish community, politically, the only thing that they really come together on masses is Israel. And right now, I think that once things die down in Gaza, that we're going to see a fissure in our community, because what's been uniting us, those to the far left and those who are more traditional, has been Philistine, not the starting point and the means, but more so that the actual violence that's been taking place against our brothers and sisters, that's been artificially uniting us, right? But in reality, when Qadi speaking, our methodologies and worldviews are very different.
Yeah,
and
totally different.
So I have this concern long term that we're going to have a permanent split in our community that might be irreconcilable for a couple of generations.
That's really what many call the identitarian Islam, which is just an identity. And by the way, that'll only be good as long as the left continues to promote minorities, because you're only sort of appreciated for that because you're a minority. Go to any Muslim countries, and liberals are not going to support Sunni Muslims. They're going to support any crazy little fringe group that exists as a minority, like the way they went crazy over the Yazidis, who sympathize with Iblis. The philosophy of Yazidis sympathizes with Iblis, right? Yazidis is a group of people that they're heretics, right? And I think at one point, one of these crazy jihadist groups like went after them at some point, right? And all of a sudden the liberals are like, oh, a minority. Like, we're worried about this minority. So it's a minority badge, and that's the only reason those leftists still like to keep it on, right? And I'm not judging people's iman, but maybe some people actually have iman. But if you actually have iman, wouldn't you want to submit to the whole thing, or at least believe in the whole thing, right? No one's saying to do everything. Nobody can be fully righteous and do 100% of the shit and never commit sins. No one's going to do that. But at least you submit to the whole thing as it is, right?
Yeah.
MashaAllah, this has been a very fruitful conversation. It's
one other comment I have to make for the audience is on my mind. You said something that sparked this in my mind.
Yeah.
The so-called conservatives, they dislike Muslims as a so-called quasi-ethnic group.
Yeah.
But they respect Islamic morality.
Yeah.
The so-called progressives or liberals, they like Muslims as a so-called minority group, a marginalized group, but they actually loathe and disdain Islamic morality. So one doesn't like Muslims, but has some respect for Islam, haqiqatan, while the others say they love Muslims, but in reality they hate the Sharia of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that's the reality of it. And to see it any other way, I believe, is really delusional.
One's going after your body, and the other's going after your akhirah. Right? The liberals, they don't mind your body being around us as long as they can poison your akhirah and your beliefs. And the other group, they actually like your influence against qawm al-huruf, and for people who don't know, that huruf means letters in Arabic. Alphabet soup, essentially, right? They like that we stand against alphabet soup, but they don't like anything else about us. And if we didn't stand for alphabet soup, they'd be totally against us in everything. They're against us on Palestine. A lot of them are fully racists, right? Secretly, that's really their agenda, and they're defending their nostalgic, white America and white Britain, right? They're fully racist, and on top of that, if they're not either of those two, then they're hardcore Christians who believe that your prophet is all sorts of bad things. So they're also a group of people who are gonna be our friends, and it's strange that anyone could not see how the right and the conservatives also have these critical issues that we'll never be friends with them for this reason, and will never fully be allied with them. So either way,
Malcolm
it was
Malcolm X summed it up 60 years ago with the wolf and fox analogy.
yeah, that's right. One is the liberal, and I think you said is like the one drives you to the other, and that's how Iblis is using them, right? The terrible Republican who tells you we're going to ban you and we're going to bomb your countries has driven you to the liberal who's inviting you, right? But he's a wolf in sheep's clothing. So he's driven you with one fitna to a worse fitna. Now you literally lost your deen forever. Before you would have just lost your life, which is bad. Now you lost your deen, right, with the other group. And we see that with a lot of these types of activists who are essentially leftists at their core belief. We ask Allah to guide us and to guide them. Thank you so much for coming on and being part of this. And may Allah accept your work and continue to bless your work. And inshallah, we will cross paths again soon. Jazakallah khairan for coming
Inshallah,
on.
Sayyidi.
Barakallah.
Take care. Assalamu alaikum.
Take care. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. All right, let's go to the comments here. Really open floor commentary here on what everyone is talking about here. This has nothing to do with it. We'll read the comments that have to do with this, and we'll also read the comments that are just general. First of all, if you are a convert, there is a sister here who is an American or Canadian sister who had become Muslim, and I did have some interactions with her on Twitter when I used to be on Twitter. I can't stand being on anything related to Elon Musk. He just hit a nerve with me with his filthy love affair with Gad Saad and the Zionists, right? So I just, some people say, is it strategic? I don't know. I don't know if it's strategic, but I despise and loathe the guy. I refuse to log on to his platform ever again, and I will not buy a Tesla as long as he owns it. Or log on to Starlink if I need to, unless I have to. Even then, but she has where is this? Is it on Twitter? Quran Space, I think it's on Twitter for non-Muslims. So Quran Space, and it's after iftar, I believe, and it's for non-Muslim for converts and born Muslims to talk and talk about things and the convert life, etc. So if Ali Forza, if you want to put the link there for people to benefit, okay. All right, let's go with another question here. Is the salah of women the same as salah for men in Islam? Okay, there are a couple answers to that, because you can't just say that. There are some differences. In the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him, the females never led the prayer, and there's maybe one time or one narration in which females led one another in prayer. So females never led the men, nor led Salat al-Jum'ah, but there are some narrations that it was a case in which they led other females in Jama'ah. And as a result, that's differed upon in the schools of thought, whether women can lead a Jama'ah. The women never prayed in front of the men or equal to the men in a Jama'ah. Okay. And that is only permitted if it's impossible otherwise, such as in Mecca, while people are making tawaf and suddenly they have to stop, and a woman may end up praying in front of or next to a male. Okay. The body that has to be covered is different as well. The coverage of the body for a female has to be everything but her face and her hands, and in some madhabs, even that has to be covered. Okay. Whereas a man can pray with his shoulders barren. It's discouraged, but he can do that. He can pray with his knee all the way down to his shins and his feet bare. He can pray with his arms completely bare, his head bare, and that is a valid prayer. He can pray with, of course, there's haid. Haid and nifas exists for women. Menstruation and postpartum bleeding, it doesn't exist for men. And a woman does not have to pray at that time, nor make up his prayer. Okay. of course, we can get banned now that saying menstruation is only for females, right? Okay. So now there was a follow-up question about, and all this is questioning that questioning regarding salah, all right? And he's saying here, if all the female Sahaba prayed the same way, well, we don't know every single aspect of how the Sahaba prayed regarding certain things called hay'ah, the physical manners of how they sat down, where they placed their arms, how they moved their fingers, and when they raised their arms, how they raised their arms, like this, like that. And all those are matters that are just, they're not even secondary. They're tertiary matters. Hence, whatever the madhabs find evidence for will be valid as long as they followed the right process. Okay, and any companion that you follow in these matters will also be valid. Okay, so that's where the differences between the madhabs is irrelevant for us. It doesn't affect the validity of salah. Okay. All right, next question, guys. Here, do you have any questions? Ryan, you want to speak?
I'm getting that dalil for the woman leading the family.
What's that?
You got me looking for the dalil.
Look up that Shafi'i dalil. We are now represented. We have Shafi'i representation on the live stream, by the way. Ryan has, now that he's studying Yemen, has become a Shafi'i. Right? Yeah. The
It's not more of a question, but it's more comment on what Sheikh Wali was talking about.
Yeah.
How he mentioned about the whole idea of Hamtrak and having, slowly.
Speak in there. Open his mic, please.
It's on?
Yes.
Test 1, 2, 3. Bismillah.
Introduce yourself to the audience here.
Abdul Faqir Suhaib from Shafi'i.
Suhaib, what's your YouTube name? Maybe people know you by that.
Suhaib Ahmed, I believe.
Okay.
Should be it.
Yeah.
I think that's it. I think I don't have any special names.
No, I thought you may have one of these like special
Chief
names.
Latif is right in front of us.
Chief Latif is on. You guys know about Chief Latif. He's here, right, sitting right next to me now. Yeah.
I thought the chief was anti-marriage.
Yeah. Hold on a second. Announcement here. I think that every night iftar. Hey, can you unhide that comment there from Alie Forza? She says every day her iftar is on YouTube. I don't know why it hid. Oh, Ali, you put a link in and YouTube automatically hides links. They want to keep you on the page, essentially. But every night, Iftar with Ali is on YouTube. It's a YouTube discussion between converts and non-converts on matters related to people entering into Islam. I think this is extremely important. Dawah is really one of the main tabligh. Tabligh is dawah at just the beginning. Someone outside of Islam into Islam. Okay. So that's extremely important. All right, keep going. Sorry to interrupt you.
So I kind of saw, I guess, two different, I guess going back, when Imam Dawud was talking about how Hamtrak and slowly Islam is being involved.
Yep.
In the communities and, things like the LGBT or Afwan, LGBTQ flag, or, aren't being displayed or whatnot. And it's slowly kind of growing on the people, it being a form of dawah. I saw like two different scales where I visited Dallas over the summer where Irving, like we mentioned earlier, Irving has their, like a neighborhood right by their masjid called Andalus, I believe.
Okay.
I think it's Andalus. It's somewhere related. Epic's trying to form their own city now, like the Epic City. But then like in Atlanta, which I just recently found over this past weekend or so, there's this, so we had the Mashaykh from Al-Maqasid come and visit us. We had Sheikh Amjad and Sheikh Yusuf. And they were in a place, I guess, an apartment complex called Glenrose Gardens. And in that is 60 Muslim families in South Atlanta, and or could seem like the hood. It's pretty. I mean, from the outside you wouldn't imagine, but then when you look inside, they have like this area where they had a third space. They refer to as a soul space, where technically they can't have it as down as Arabad or like an Islamic gathering or a zawi or anything, but it's a place where they gather up. Usually it's Muslims that kind of, use it. And I mean, it's nothing bougie, nothing too fancy, but it's kind of like implementing it. And then you see like the kids playing outside, and they kind of grow around to this, and it's kind of, it's just crazy how that form itself can grow on people, and inshallah, like the effects that it has, later on,
that's really good.
Quite big, yeah.
MashaAllah, that's really good. That's really good. Someone says, I want to move to East Brunswick recently. I did move to East Brunswick recently. Anyway, I can help with MBIC, La Cocina, Safina Society, building up. All right. This person is also known as Uga Panda. Who we met at NYU. Okay. When we spoke, and I was surprised they even invited me to NYU because they're more on the little bit leftist side of things, woke side of things. But I was surprised, and they took a lot of slack for having that invitation, by the way. Remember when we went there? They're like, yeah, like half the NYU wouldn't come out to something like that, where you're just talking, the way we talk about the deen. They had those ideas, but nonetheless, and also Imam Khalil Latif came in and welcomed us, which was very nice of him. But Uga Panda, you can help out for sure, depending on your skill set. You want to be part of the events committee, you got to meet us and hang out with us, and we got to see you. So you moved in recently, I guess. That's why we haven't seen you. So you need to come out and meet us, inshallah ta'ala. I'll probably be there at the masjid tonight, probably for Aisha. And you can come here to the stream when we stream, and then we could plug you in somewhere. Wednesday, you want to help with the soup kitchen? We need help with that, right?
When we met him, I told him, like, you look like an Uga Panda.
He
looks like
subhanallah.
an Uga Panda.
Subhanallah. That's crazy.
I have a question.
Yes.
So I seen a pretty famous Muslim speaker, and when I met all these guys, like I used to watch him, but I kind of stay away from him now.
Okay.
But he recently had a podcast where he identified himself as an early Hanafi. Now, is there a difference between an early Hanafi and a regular Hanafi?
I can't answer that question. Early Hanafi and later Hanafi. I can't answer that. But we take our madhabs bit tawatur, right? So when there's an opinion way up in the history, when we take a madhab and we act upon a school of thought, tawatur is very important. Mass transmission. Someone said to me, what if we have absolute certainty that Imam al-Tabari or one of the other Imams, Awza'i, who used to have a madhab, he was a mujtahid. If we know for sure he has an opinion on a matter, and that opinion contradicts the four schools of thought, why can't we follow it? I said, because it hasn't reached us with tawatur, with mass transmission. It only reached us by that one quote, and a solitary quote, no matter how authentic or how respected or trusted that authority is, it's still one quote, right? It's not tawatur. So we have to accept, we practice what came down to us with tawatur. I like the analogy that someone once gave of medicine. There are medicines that are transmitted to us. Anyone who prescribes it, they will not be accused of malpractice. But there are some techniques and some medicines and some things that are so unique that they haven't been tested, they haven't been approved, and you could actually get charged with malpractice for prescribing this medicine. That's how we view things. We want our religion to be on the trodden path. And not only that, that unifies you with the ummah. Okay? It unifies you with the ummah. Where you're practicing something that has a strong basis, a good swath of the ummah is practicing it. All right, next question. Are religion and culture opposed? First of all, no human being doesn't have a culture. What is a culture? It's all the little things that you do and you have to decide how to do it, right, in life. And everyone makes a decision that basically makes life better, right? That's what culture is. It's every little decision that I have to make. When you got up in the morning, you dressed a certain way, you combed your hair a certain way. When you went to the barbershop, you asked them to do certain things with your hair, and you didn't ask them to do other things with your hair. When you eat food, that's how you ate certain foods, you didn't eat certain foods, right? When you go to a wedding, you behave a certain way, you do certain things, you dress certain ways. Every single decision that you have to make, right? Add the whole thing up together, and that's culture. The only difference is that we have to go through a second filter. It's not just what benefits me, it's what my religion says. So when I dress in the morning, I have to make a decision, right? And my decision is that I'm not going to disobey Allah in that by doing this. So we call those cultures that are mulgha. Mulgha, canceled. A cultural thing that contradicts the Sharia is a culture that we cancel. The Sharia cancels it out. It deems it invalid. It's culture for certain people to wake up in the morning in the spring and go out in shorts. Okay, well, if you're a guy, you have to lengthen your short. It has to cover your thigh up to the knee. Minimum up to the knee. So your knee can show. At the least in Islam, and according to the difference of opinions, at the least. Okay, has to cover your knee, or at least at the knee. And a little bit more because when you sit down, it's going to go up. So you need the knee, to the knee and a little bit more. Because when you sit down, when you go down for sujood, your knee's going to show. And if you're a woman, you can't wear shorts at all, right? So now here's, and this is especially with the conversations with converts. Culture, it cannot be canceled right away. It just doesn't work like that. You personally can fix a lot of your culture, but Muslims have to realize that culture changes slowly. And when someone enters Islam, if it's too drastic, you can impact them negatively. So we have to have some kind of sabr. When people come into Islam with a culture that contains a bunch of prohibitions, we have to be very patient with them. Okay. We can't jump all over them and assume that their religion is invalid because they're not practicing 100% of Islam. So we have to have sabr with that. You just can't cancel cultures, right? When a religious brother becomes Muslim, in his family, when a Muslim brother starts practicing his deen, his own family has cultures that's forbidden. All the weddings, okay? Half of the stuff is forbidden, okay? I know, for example, you're Palestinian. A lot of the weddings, like a lot, I could say for Egyptians too, it's as if Sharia gets suspended on that day. I'm telling you, even the bride, she doesn't wear hijab on the wedding. I'm telling you. Yeah. And there are muhajjabat, women in hijab with white hair, who tell her to take it off. Like, sister, you are like literally about to go to your grave. You're on your last decade. Why are you telling someone to do something haram, right? So maybe they don't know, right? And you can't be surprised how much people don't know, right? You literally, don't be surprised when people truly have no concept of fard versus culture. They may think this is a cultural thing, right? I knew a woman in her mid-40s thought that hijab was a cultural thing for old women because their hair no longer looks nice. SubhanAllah, the Sharia is the exact opposite. Old women, there's like, it gets looser with older women. If an older woman, 75-year-old woman, comes up to you and her hijab falls off and she hugs you, there's hardly any sins in that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it mentions in the Quran, the qawa'id min al-nisa, women who are like khalas, left out to graze and ready to die. Right? That's, old people are like that, right? They have different rules for them. It's less of an issue. Now, she grew up with the mentality that it's the opposite, right? That they're the ones who wear hijab and they pray and they go to Hajj because they're about to die, okay? Whereas the young, this is just like a suggestion, a cultural suggestion, cultural practice. This is somebody who grew up in an Islamic city, Islamic world, and up to mid-40s. This is what they thought, right? So, subhanAllah.
There's one cultural practice in the subcontinent. I think anyone from the subcontinent knows about it, pretty much. It's like when the adhan starts, all the women wear the hijab.
Yeah.
I don't know if like, Alie, you know what I'm talking about?
Recitation or the other.
Like whenever they hear it, it's as if like it's kufr not to do it. That's
Yeah.
how extreme it is with these people.
I knew a
I'm just
guy.
Curious, like,
What is that?
yeah, I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Like, I want to know where that came from. Like, I actually don't know.
What is it?
This
As
practice
soon
that
as the
they do.
adhan,
Like the adhan plays.
maybe malaika come. The presence of malaika.
So I've heard like it's from adab. Like it's not like a bid'ah.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's like
the Hanafi say it's allowed. But
anytime that malaika are there, they cover up. Let me tell you this too. I was going to tell you that I knew a brother that his understandings of Islam had sort of confused. He'd never had categories of what's obligatory, what's sunnah, what's lightly recommended. So this guy is like swimming in interest, riba. He curses. There's all these things. But when he prays, if and when he prays, he rolls his pants all the way up, right? But, you know, may Allah accept it from him, because it's like that's what he thinks is Islam, right? So he rolls it all the way up. And if he sees someone not rolling up his pants, he tells him off, right? Because that's what he understands Salah to be and Islam to be. So you can't, when we try to learn, it's extremely important to understand, you know, what the mentality of other people is out there, so that we don't end up stepping all over them with assumptions, right? And essentially maybe driving them away. Okay. All right. And we're going to start witnessing a middle culture like that, where people are very slowly, Imam Dawud, when he said people were selling crack and then now they're praying Taraweeh, I wanted to say, and they go back to selling crack after Taraweeh is over, right? Because that exists too. Don't imagine that people are not light switches that go on and off. And when people who come from very sinful backgrounds try to come into Islam, okay, you can imagine when they fall back into bad habits, they fall into calamities. They don't fall into little bad habits like a Muslim boy, oh, I'm back to listening to music again. That's his bad habit, okay? I'm back to, sitting very casually with his female cousins in a way that's not appropriate, right? That's not the bad habit they're falling into. They fall into zina, if that's what the life they came from. And if they need a quick buck, they know how to sell drugs. So we can't be, we have to have an understanding that when people come from a background, you don't just backspace and delete their background right away. It takes a lot of time. And the best advice is, that they not try to bite off too much. Is you bite off too much and then you fall, you get worse and you feel terrible about yourself. But makes change slowly. There was a brother in London one time using the miswak. He's using miswak. So I went up to talk to him, a Muslim brother, right? Using right outside the schools, using miswak. Then my friend came over and called me over. So why are you talking to that guy, right? I said, why not? He's your brother, who has a beard, using miswak. We're chit-chatting with the guy. He's like, that's your local weed seller, right? Yeah. So you have to be very slow, and very consistent on something that's suitable to you, and you will slowly erode your jahiliyyah and your darkness. Small habits. Speak.
Would you say that this applies to dawah to, I guess, non-Muslims? Like, okay, so for example, within our context, we're looking at doing more dawah on our campus.
Yep.
Because we see that there's a need for it, there's an interest in Islam. However, we also have a lot of hostile characters on campus, like, people from Christian groups coming to try and debate, slander the Prophet ﷺ. So with this slow kind of introducing Islamic culture to these people, kind of help with that kind of thing, especially because we're not ulama, we're not, we don't really have the authority to, I don't want to say authority, but, we're not super qualified to be able to handle these kinds of people in a way that, an imam would.
I don't know. It's a good question. Basically, how do we interact with different groups on campus? Is the summary of your question, right?
And give dawah to those who are interested in Islam.
I would have to say that to be active is always better than to be inactive. Yet, activity has to be with knowledge. So know what you know and know what you don't know. Well, Sheikh al-Maghili's answer to that question was very simple too. And he said, speak about what you know and ask about what you don't know. But don't speak about what you don't know, right? So you have to know what you know, and you have to know what you don't know, and don't let your mind guess, right? And don't catch yourself defending something you don't know. Just say, I don't know the answer. There is an answer, but I don't know what it is, right? You have to be able to say that, because they may have questions, especially the Christians, the Protestant evangelicals. They may have questions that they've studied. They studied questions about Islam that you may not answer. And then you get nervous. Why would you get nervous? You're not advertised as knowing everything. Say, there is an answer to that. I'm confident there's an answer to that, but I don't know it. Yeah. All right, let's take a couple more questions here. Ryan, did you get the evidence?
Yeah, well, they didn't go into much shop, but there's just a hadith that says,
okay, so the one of the pieces of evidence of the Shafi'iyya that they allow for women to lead women in salah is a hadith that a woman shall not lead a man in prayer. Therefore, they go by mafhum al-mukhalafa. Mafhum al-mukhalafa is understanding from the opposite. So if the Prophet ﷺ said a woman cannot lead a man in prayer, that means she can lead a woman in prayer. The other thing is, I believe that Shawafi allow for qiyas in ibadat. They allow for analogy. That's a deep question, yeah. But the Malikis' rule on is very simple. The salah is only taken on what the Prophet did and what the sahabiyat, the female companions, did in prayer, because the Prophet specifically said this. He said, take your prayer pray as you see me pray. And that's it. So therefore, prayer, there's no room for analogy. There's no room for adding and subtracting what we think is good. Hey, go up. There's a question on awliya on Instagram. Let's see that. What is the difference between awliya and awliya and Arif billah? Okay, the awliya is a broader term than Arif billah. Wilaya has two conditions: fulfilling your obligations and doing many nawafil. Nawafil is extra ibadah. On top of that, the ulama say that because you need to know the difference between an obligation and a nafilah, and you need to know nawafil, they say the unspoken premise is knowledge. The unspoken premise here and precondition is knowledge. Because think about that, you do need to know what's a nafilah, right? And you need to know when to stop your nafilah for an obligation. So you need to have some basic knowledge. So they said that too. But Arif billah is a specific quality in which a person studies the ways in which Allah interacts with His creation. Okay? The ways in which Allah Ta'ala does things with His creation. So the sunan of Allah in His creation. Allah mentioned in the Quran that He has sunan, which are His ways of doing things in the creation. And that's what Arif focuses on. He looks for these patterns and he studies them, and he reads studies them in the Quran and Hadith and etc. Mass W, any recommendations for a brother to gain weight? Ugh. What problem do you have and where can I get it? Right? Maybe I shouldn't say that, right? But if that's your issue, a lot of people here envy you. There are a lot of wonderful restaurants. What does your mom cook? What kind of cuisine does she cook? Okay, you can now have sugar in your chai instead of having monk fruit. Okay, huh?
Mass gainer shakes.
You can have gainer shakes. You can go have burgers. You can have fries. That's not good weight though. You want to have good weight. You can go have chicken. You're gonna have rice. Get homemade food. Get lamb chops. Put them on the grill. Any one of you fasting here? Right? Pull the grill out as soon as it's going to get warm. Pull the grill out. Get some lamb chops. Make some homemade burgers. Get married. Get married. That's a great answer. Get married. Okay. Victory of the wife is when he starts to gain weight. Right? The wife is winning. Okay. So do that. You need to gain weight. That's the answer for that. Okay. If all dua is accepted by Allah, what is the difference between dua made generally and dua made during times of acceptance? Time of acceptance, the answer is more likely. Okay? No, it's the dua is accepted. Dua is accepted. It could be in different ways. Number one, but no, not all dua is accepted. When we say accepted, it means as you asked it. Okay, all dua is rewarded. That's a different point. Okay, every dua is rewarded, not necessarily accepted. Your dua may be rewarded by removing harm from your path. Right, so. Dua may be rewarded by it being saved for you, and you get its reward on the Day of Judgment, which is better for you because it's eternal. The reward of afterlife is eternal. The reward of this life is temporary. However, when your dua is accepted, it increases your love of Allah and your iman, because I made dua and it was answered. From that respect, dua being accepted is better. So when the ahadith say dua is accepted, okay, in those specific times, it's more likely to be accepted as you ask it. So don't confuse my dua was accepted versus my dua was rewarded. That's a big difference there. Okay. How do we attain wilaya? We attain wilaya by seeking knowledge of the sharia and aqidah from correct sources and acting upon it as much as we can. And then busy yourself with saying la ilaha illallah. Anyone here who's listening, who is trying to learn for the first time, learn about dhikr, and you pick up a misbah and you busy yourself by saying la ilaha illallah all day and all night whenever you can, whether you're in the car, whether you're walking, even if you're watching TV, busy yourself with saying la ilaha illallah day and night. You will see that you're polishing your heart. The first dhikr, for the first one starting on the path of dhikr, is la ilaha illallah. And you will notice yourself that your attachment to the dunya is decreasing. And you should know that you should get the misbah that has counters like this. There is a counter that counts to 1,000. And every time you move one of those, there's a second counter. This is 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, up to 10,000. Get those counters and every day finish it. Okay? With dhikr of la ilaha illallah. If you don't know how to read Quran, if you don't have a teacher to learn from, which no excuse for that. There are good YouTube videos that people that are trustworthy knowledge on YouTube, explained very easily. But if you're someone who's just starting out and you want to strengthen your iman, repeat la ilaha illallah all day, under your breath or out loud. But you do need to move your tongue. Move your tongue with la ilaha illallah. How simple is that? Okay. Let's wrap it up with, it's 3:42. Let's wrap it up with one or two more questions before I have another 4 o'clock appointment that I have to go to. Fatima King says, NBF hits differently when in the haram. MashaAllah. So make dua for everyone who's here and us. All right. The sister is in al-haram. So what's the biggest difference in the Maliki school from the different regions? Okay, this is a good question. In the Maliki school spread to Syria, to Iraq, to Egypt, and to Andalus. Of these four, the opinions, the books, the knowledge that came out of Andalus is the best. Reason of that is very simple. All those other regions were mixed. The madhabs mixed, and the Maliki school went up and down. At some point in Egypt, it was gone for a couple hundred years. When it came back by a scholar named Ibn Shas. Ibn Shas, he was raised around Shafi'is. He had a Shafi'i mind. And he approached the Maliki school and he revived it. But he had his methodology was very influenced by the Shafi'is. As a result, right, he differed with the Malikis of the West, of Tunisia, Morocco, and Andalus. That's all one. When we say Andalus, we mean Tunisia, Morocco, and Andalus. Those Malikis were untouched. So that is a Maliki way of thinking, meaning how to assess evidence, how to come to conclusions. That's what we mean by that, right? On speculative matters, on indefinitive, undefinitive, not definitive matters. And so whenever we have to have they differ, we go to the West, Islamic West, and we take their opinions. So they are the best preservers, the purest preservation of the way Imam Malik himself would have thought about things. Can I have a good dream when I'm junub? Yes. Having a good dream is not predicated upon sleeping on tahara. However, more likely, if you sleep on janaba, you would not have a good dream, because sleeping on purity is a sunnah and it's better. So let's say a man is junub and he doesn't want to take a shower before he sleeps. He makes wudu. Speak.
I heard the Malikis of another region.
Yeah.
They preferred Sahih Muslim over Sahih Bukhari. Could you explain this a little bit?
Yes. Why did the Malikiya prefer Muslim over Bukhari? Imam Bukhari did not set out to compile the summary of hadiths related to Sunnah, and that's it. Imam al-Bukhari's book is his opinion. He is doing ijtihad. He is telling you what he believes is correct. So he is bringing his madhab, his opinions with him. Okay. Imam Muslim, in contrast, is like giving you the top, let's say, 5 hadiths on each subject, right? And he's not, and it's more encyclopedic. It's like a mini encyclopedia rather than a book of knowledge. Al-Bukhari's book combines between having the greatest, the strongest chains. Okay, no one disagrees on that. His chains are the strongest, but it also is his opinion on matters. Okay, and he takes out portions of a hadith and puts it in a chapter, because again, his point is not to bring you the whole hadith, to be a reference for hadiths. His point is to bring you what he believes is what you need. So that's the difference between Bukhari and Muslim. What is considered mixing? Mixing in the Maliki school has different levels. First of all, the first level is what is forbidden, and that is mixing that involves the touching of the bodies. Mixing in such a crammed place that your bodies are touching. That is the mixing that is forbidden. Then there is a mixing that is highly discouraged in itself because it can lead to prohibitions. That is the mixing in which there is unnecessarily close distances between genders where they can look at each other. And hence a man could be staring at a woman, or a woman could be staring at a man. Okay, and then they both get fitna in their hearts. So in that, there is not a direct prohibition, but it's discouraged. But it's highly discouraged because it can lead to a prohibition. Okay, and Umar ibn Khattab said, separate between the breaths, meaning that you shouldn't even hear each other breathe. If you hear each other breathe, you're too close. So that's the unnecessary mixing like that is highly discouraged, if not forbidden. If there's like a shubha of a reason, it goes down to discouraged, right? But if there's absolutely no reason, then it may elevate to prohibition. Right? Absolutely no valid. When we say reason, valid reason, like a client, for example, lawyer and a client like that, a doctor, etc. So that's a summary of it right there. Now, online dawah, you have to be very careful of falling into the trap of what they call sliding into the DMs, right? That's what you guys call it, right? So you got to be careful of that, and that happens all the time. And Shaitan's, easy go-to with righteous Muslims is, I need to message her for the sake of dawah. I need to bring her a benefit, right? There's probably 500 million, 500 million Muslim females, but this is the one that you want to benefit. You want to bring benefit to her. So that's the problem, and there's tons and tons and tons of online drama. And one person once told me, I was messaging her, then she stopped answering me. She must have taken it the wrong way. But I was like, no, I think she took it the right way. You're messaging her for no real reason, so she didn't answer you. So I think she took it the right way, right? And she acted right. But you're going to do that, then you're going to be heartbroken, right? And feel stupid for being ignored. All right?
They call it
I can fix her, huh? I don't know. Ladies and gentlemen, we got to go. All right. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. Hold on, we have to take one more question. Osmani says, who institutionalized the process of wilaya and Sufism? The scholars. First of all, nobody can say who attains wilaya. We can say this is the path to wilaya. Only Allah knows who is a wali and who is not. But the path is what's in the book and the sunnah. That's number one. Was it sunnah of the Sahaba or later bid'ah hasana? Bid'ah hasana is something that has come up by implication from the Sahaba. All right, by implication of Umar ibn Khattab when they established Taraweeh and other things that they did, such as divide the Quran into ajza and other things like that. And later by Shafi'i when he approved of certain things that were not directly in the Sunnah, but he found them good. Okay, such as the elongated takbirat of Eid that were meant to educate people on other things, right? So they elongated the takbirs of Eid, things like that. And the one who formalized this in scholarship in usul was Al-Izz ibn Abd al-Salam, Sultan al-Ulama, as he is known, a Syrian Shafi'i scholar who ended up moving to Egypt because he forbade wrong against the Syrian governor, and the Egyptians welcomed him. And many of the matters associated with Sufism are not even needed, not even in the slightest, in order to achieve the wilaya. If you just took on what every Muslim agrees upon, do dhikr, read Quran, pray nawafil, fast, give sadaqah, do good deeds, go to the masajid, believe what is directly there without interpretation in the Quran about Allah's attributes, you can attain wilaya. It's not so difficult. As one of my teachers used to say, Allah makes it easy, Mufti makes it difficult. Right? So that's how easy it is. جزاكم الله خيرا everyone. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
Kalbe şiir